Alongside our NHL analyst, Frankie Corrado. Frankie, stop me if you've heard this one before. The Leafs and the Oilers have some trouble in their back end when it comes to goaltending and defense. The Leafs have given up 13 goals in their first 3 games this season. The Oilers have given up 12 in their first 2 games. Which team has more reason to be concerned about their D and their goaltending right now?
I'd be more concerned if I were the Edmonton Oilers. And I'm not even sure where you want to start with this one, Gino, but why don't we start here? You have the 2 best players in the world on the Edmonton Oilers, and those guys continue to show up year after year, not only in the regular season, but also in the playoffs, only to have those performances consistently negated by what ails this team and the inefficiencies on the back end and in net. At some point, these 2 guys are going to want to push through and win a Stanley Cup, get to the finals, but I don't think it can happen with the goaltending that they have. It hasn't just been one bad game or one bad week for Jack Campbell. It's been half a season with the Toronto Maple Leafs, a full season with the Edmonton Oilers, and after a strong preseason, he gets off to a bad start in Vancouver and gets pulled from that game. The sample size is large enough now to know that Jack Campbell is not bringing this team to the Stanley Cup final or winning a Stanley Cup. So you hope that Stuart Skinner can push through and find a way to do it. But after what we saw in the playoffs last year, it seemed like he was a little bit out of place, maybe a little shell-shocked at times. The best thing for the Edmonton Oilers would be for Stuart Skinner to push through, but you can't put that much faith into a young goaltender who's still trying to find his way in the league.
I couldn't agree with you more. So if that's the issue is you're not comfortable with your goaltending right now. You look around the league, there's really not somebody you can bring in right now. What do you do with your current manpower on the ice to protect these guys in net?
Well, it's funny because coming into the season, we heard a narrative that the Edmonton Oilers were going to change how they do things in the defensive zone. It was going to be a little more of a zone system rather than the man-on-man system. Ideally, you're thinking there that you're going to provide a little more insulation in the defensive zone. So if one player gets beat, there's a safety valve. And that way you can create layers between the attack and the front of the net. That hasn't been the case for the Edmonton Oilers. What looks like a zone defense right now is lacking a little bit of one-on-one defense. And what I mean by that is if I'm a defenseman, I just can't stay in my quadrant of the ice and defend that piece of ice without defending the man, whether it's someone who has the puck or someone who doesn't have the puck. And because that's happening, it's created so many lanes for players to get their way to the front of the net, get screens, tips, find ways to score goals. Their defensive zone structure, which I actually think improved last year, especially with the addition of Matthias Ekholm, doesn't look like it's going to help out a goaltending duo that's not quite ready to go. Another thing, the Edmonton Oilers are spending $7.6 million on this goaltending tandem, $5 million on Jack Campbell, and there's term attached to both of those guys. When I look at the Toronto Maple Leafs, yeah, it's not great what's going on in the net right now. Ilya Samsonov at times this year has looked like he's training for the 100-meter breaststroke in the net, but there's not as much money attached to those guys. There's no term attached to those guys other than Joseph Woll being a young, promising goaltender of the future with another year left on his deal. So for the Oilers, they're stuck with who they got, and I don't know who's going to rid them of the problem that they have in net.
All right, getting back to the blue line. So the Oilers bring in Ekholm to anchor that blue line. Brad Treliving had some money to work on his blue line. He chose to add a power play specialist in John Klingberg. Was that a mistake in the way they were spending their money?
It wasn't a mistake if you think about what the priorities were. And the Leafs, we know, wanted to keep Luke Schenn. He got priced out of that market. That kind of player, that big, rugged, robust defenseman, you had to pay a premium for that guy, and you had to attach term to that guy. Look at Luke Schenn. Look at what Radko Gudas got in Anaheim. A year previously, look what a guy like Eric Goodbranson got from the Columbus Blue Jackets. So if you're not willing to give a big player who's aging that kind of money in term, you look at what's the other priority for this team. And John Klingberg helps fit the need of another priority for the blue line, which was to add a little more offensive pop from the blue line. So I can't fault it there. John Klingberg has done his job on the offensive side of the puck. He hasn't looked great on the defensive side of the puck. And you would think when you slot him in next to a player like Jake McCabe, those two pieces would complement each other. Klingberg would be free to get up in the rush, join the play offensively, especially on the offensive blue line, and McCabe would be a little more of that safety valve. Right now, they don't look like they're reading off each other. They don't look like they're communicating well. It looks like both guys want to be involved at the same time, and it's causing problems from the offensive zone through the neutral zone back into the defensive zone, and it's leading to goals against. For those two guys, they need to get in a video room and think about how that pairing is going to work together, because right now, there's no help on the way. Unless Sheldon Keefe is going to tinker with the D pairs and find different partners for guys, that's exactly who they have to go with, because like you talked about, Gino, there's not a lot of help out there for these guys. At some point, the blue line will look different for the Leafs, but it's early in the season, and these guys need to shore up what ails them defensively. But going back to your question, I don't fault them for trying to fix another issue of a couple that they did have on the blue line.
All right, briefly, if they can't change the manpower, the Oilers and the Leafs, they go out there and say, okay, we want to change the goaltending, we want to change the blue line, and they're not able to do that, and this is the manpower they have. I know it's early in the season, but if this is still the manpower they have at the end of the season, can either one of these be seriously considered a Stanley Cup contender as they are right now, defensively and goaltending-wise?
It's very early in the season. We don't want to incite panic, Gino. That's not what we do. We are the voice of reason here, or at least I'm the voice of reason. I know you like to stir the pot a little bit with Oilers fans and Leafs fans. But if this continues, like if you can't get a save and the defensive structure doesn't look good, and it becomes one of those things where night after night you're getting eaten up off the rush and teams are filling the back of the net, the proof is in the pudding. And if that continues to happen, then you can't consider yourself legit Stanley Cup contenders. Because as we've learned here with these high-powered offenses led by McDavid and Draisaitl and Matthews and Marner, if you want to win a Stanley Cup, you cannot outscore your problems. Because when it gets playoff time, the ice shrinks, and that kind of offensive power is not available to you. So both these teams, if they want a legitimate shot, they got to roll the dice here and hope that one of these goaltenders gets hot for them and they can find a way to have some semblance of defensive zone structure and not leave their goaltenders out to dry on a nightly basis.
For the record, Frankie, I think you just poked the bear, and I'm looking forward to the reaction. Hey, our comments are open. Let us know what you have to think, what you have to say about what Frankie's been saying.